Okay, Dave, so we have a main event here of a fatal four-way match where all four members of the McMahon family have their particular charges kind of being led into battle. You've got Rock, you've got Triple H, you've got The Big Show, and you've got Mick Foley, who had just done a retirement stip the month before with Triple H, and they brought back for the show to replace Chris Jericho, who was supposed to have Foley's spot before they decided to bring him back. Talk about the dynamic of the very first multiple-person WrestleMania main event. Was it thought to be awkward and strange? It still, to me, seems like an outlier in WrestleMania history.
Yeah, and I mean, there's almost a mentality that you shouldn't do it. Although they did through the three-way in WrestleMania 20, but I felt it like in the build and everything. I mean, the whole thing was the four McMahons. It wasn't the four-way. It was the four McMahons. It was a McMahon celebration, and the wrestlers were almost like the pawns. But I mean, Austin was strong, and Rock was very, very strong, and Triple H was So wait, was Austin even in that one? Was
No.
No. So it was
Foley.
It was Foley and Big Show, right?
Yeah.
Was Big Show the fourth guy? So they didn't have Austin. Okay. The one thing that I remember though is that and this was where I really remember the WrestleMania being so big was I thought four ways isn't the right thing. I mean, there were, Foley was coming back on a retirement stip way too quick. There were all these things that I thought was going to flatten it out, and it didn't. It did great numbers on pay-per-view. So at that point, it was like WrestleMania. That was the first one where I saw WrestleMania, the name guarantees you a big pay-per-view, even though in 2003 it didn't happen, but every other year it did.
Now, you mentioned Steve Austin, and had Steve Austin not needed the neck surgery that he got in, or that he left for in November of 1999 at the Survivor Series, was there a plan in place for him for this WrestleMania?
I don't even remember exactly what was, I just don't remember. I think that I had thought that it was going to be, was it Triple H and The Rock probably, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, not knowing, nobody told me that or anything like that, but I was just feeling and watching the TV, that was like my mentality. It was like, okay, we're building the Triple H and The Rock, and then all of a sudden, it was like we had Big Show thrown in, after that they screwed up the Royal Rumble finish, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Foley, came out of nowhere because, I mean, Foley was done. He really was supposed to be done. I mean, he gave that interview, I'm not coming. This is not a retirement where I'm coming back under a mask, where I'm coming back in 7 weeks, and he came back in whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
He didn't, and he had that, he absolutely had the mixed emotions about doing it. I think it was the idea of the payday of main eventing WrestleMania, the idea of main eventing WrestleMania weighed against, his promise to the fans and everything. And I think he had a hard time with it, but, he made the decision he made. And I think he probably, for him, in hindsight, made the right decision because nobody else ever lived up to stipulation either. So,
Right.
It's not like he was doing something for the right in wrestling because nobody else was going to do it anyway, so he didn't change wrestling for the better. So might as well make the payday.
Kind of like not quitting in '97 after Montreal. No one else is going to do it.
Right. I mean, I think that, then he was trying to do it. He take a moral stand, and I think it was, in his mind, the right stand. And then it's like, well, nobody else is doing it, and Brett's making all this money.
Right.
Brett's making more money than anyone, so what am I...
Who am I holding bad for here? Yeah.
Yeah.
In the McMahon four-way dynamic, of course, Stephanie McMahon's charge was Triple H, who had retired Mick Foley in a cell match the month before at the Royal Rumble, had a fantastic blowout garbage match with him with all kinds of chair shots and tacks and insanity. Mick really put Triple H over strong. In late '99 is really when Triple H took center stage. They had the Test Stephanie McMahon romance that was supposed to end in a wedding, and Triple H kind of, kidnaps Stephanie, drugs her, and marries her in a drive-through window in Vegas, and it turns out that she's all about him. The next month, she is more than happy to be with him. And
right. When was the Vince match with Triple H where she does the turn, which everyone knew was coming. And I mean, it's funny, but whatever it was, the writer who put all this together, the writing team that put all this together. changed the course of wrestling history even more than Austin and Bret Hart's match.
I want to ask, where did Triple H and Stephanie actually become an item in this whole thing?
I mean, I thought it was a little bit later, but I mean, it was funny when I remember watching it on TV, and it was Triple H was so. There were certain things Triple H said in the way he said them, where I was going like, I was thinking like something's going to happen. But of course, we all knew he was with China at the time.
Right.
But and that's exactly what happened. But I mean, I remember, and I think that before they ever did it, it's funny because Vince, you know, they will say, Paul and Stephanie will say that Vince knew before they did, and I'm thinking that, you know, I watched that TV. And there were certain things, you know, and I don't know what the timing was, and they probably knew before I did because they were actually the people. But I certainly remember stuff on that TV where I was thinking like, wow, there's something here that's more than an act. Even though at the time I was kicking myself going like, you idiot, they're just good actors. But years later, it's like, yeah, you know what? It really was there.
Now, Dave, what about the idea that, you know, as this plays out, Triple H is kind of becoming a guy that they're pushing very, very hard. And
he became a superstar that year, I think.
No question. And in '99 at SummerSlam, he gets that Triple H, Stone Cold, Mankind three-way with Ventura as ref. That was, you know, they kind of kicked around Austin versus Triple H straight one-on-one at one point. So
that was the idea until Ventura was ref, and there was, you know, and Austin wanted to lose to Foley instead of Triple H, and so Foley got his 1 day or something.
Yep, that 1 day reign.
Yeah, that served a big purpose, I suppose.
So my question about this particular point in time was, what was the feeling? We try to track as we go through WrestleMania history when guys become the guy, and here is Triple H's moment. What was the feeling about whether Triple H was actually ready and equipped, or if the push came too hard? Because everybody talks about Triple H like he's always been over, like everyone has always seen the superstar in him, but I remember this period as being one where there was some uncertainty as to whether he was being pushed harder than he was bringing to the table in terms of what he was bringing to the table.
I thought that he was overpushed compared to what he was bringing to the table until the Foley feud. When the Foley feud was over, and in the middle of the Foley feud, it was just like, okay, he's it. I mean, in the sense of not it like The Rock, but I just remember watching going, he is you know, and a lot of people didn't like him at the time, and because of the, you know, he got chances for years because of his looks and the body and the size that other guys wouldn't, and his friends that other guys wouldn't have gotten. You know, he failed as the Greenwich Beach prancing guy, right? And he had a big push there, where they gave him all the models all the time, and you know, but when he had China, I mean, you know, you could see, okay, he was becoming a main event guy. But even then I didn't, you know, I thought he was being pushed a little bigger than he really was. But with the Foley feud, I think when the Foley feud was on, I thought his feud with Foley, those matches that they had, the dynamic, the promos, I thought they were all great. And, of course, Foley lost every single angle and every single match because he was on his way out and he might as well. It's the right thing for the business. But I thought that being there at that time and all that just made, you know, I thought that it made, you know, Triple H.
So, Dave, we have obviously talked about here that the main event was a fatal four-way match, and also at this WrestleMania there were no one-on-one matches. Can you give any insight as to why that is? I mean, it seems odd that there would be no traditional one-on-one match at WrestleMania.
I just think that the cards fell that way. You know, I don't think there's like a reason. I think that they, you know, even when they did like I said, the four-way was because of the idea of the four McMahons. That's what that was all about. And then the rest was just what it was. I don't think that it was like something that was planned to be that way. Just the way everything worked out, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And one of the multiple person matches on this show, pretty much a landmark event, is tables, ladders, and chairs. Christian and Edge versus the Dudleys versus the Hardys in just a stunt show, demolition derby and a half. We talked, Dave, about Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 10 in the ladder match. It strikes me that this thing was a definitive push past that match as being kind of like the state of the art, for better or worse, ladder match, what we come to think of as a ladder match. Was this a move forward in a good way that these guys went to the extreme lengths they did here at WrestleMania 2000, or is it a bad thing?
It was both.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good for them because they were guys, all of them were guys that would not traditionally have gotten past a certain level. And, I mean, Jeff ended up being a superstar. Edge ended up being a superstar. The other ones ended up being players that, had long runs. The match and, the whole idea of the feud is certainly something that people still talk about today. They were talking about it in TNA just a couple of weeks ago. But I do remember that, I mean, that match is a pretty freaking vivid memory.
Yeah.
Because it was just, like even since when people have tried to equal it, I don't know that anyone, I mean, the other one that they did, because they did the one in Raleigh later. Yeah. That was equally as good, but
and to be clear, I made a mistake. That WrestleMania match here is a straight ladder match with a million ladders involved. The one at SummerSlam in Raleigh is TLC,
right. where they took it that one place. But still, I mean, this WrestleMania match and the SummerSlam match were both just freaking out of this world stunt show matches that I think maybe I mean the Shawn one was very impactful, because it was the first one, but this was one that took it to a level that I don't know that's ever been passed. I mean, I remember that there was a ladder match with Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho that was phenomenal, and there was a ladder match with Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho that was also phenomenal, but they were more wrestling matches with a ladder. This was a full-blown, young guys doing stuff that nobody should ever do and living to tell the tale. You know what I mean? I mean, those risks that they took and those flights out of the ring, through tables like they were shot out of a cannon and stuff. Man, that was something.
This also sees WrestleMania 2000, the WWF debuts of Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn, who all defected from WCW in the early part of 2000 after disagreements and booking changes and just a defection, and really a point at which the wheels truly came off at WCW. You could tell they were beginning to circle the drain. Dave, your recollections of the Radicals coming over all at once like that and sort of what it meant for the state of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the middle of all that stuff in many ways. Not so much talking to them, but certainly talking to people who were talking to them. And Conan, was in that group, but WWF didn't take him when it was all going down. So, I mean, I just remember, all throughout the day on my cell phone, no matter where I was, I would be getting a call from, and there were several different people, involved. And it was just like, what's going on here? What's the business here? So it was like I saw that thing unfolding. And I was really surprised when they gave Chris Benoit the title that he just said, screw it. I don't care about your title. I'm leaving. I mean, I thought that was like a peace offering, and they were making money. And, plus I thought that that Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, not so much Malenko and Saturn, but Benoit and Eddie Guerrero were so valuable that WCW would want to keep them. But, I mean, the feeling was like, they were so anti-Kevin Sullivan. And the feeling was that we can't have talent go in there and tell us who can be the booker. I thought that making Kevin the booker at that point in time, and Kevin, Kevin had his runs as a booker where he was very good, and this wasn't, the 2000 run wasn't one of them. I mean, that was a bad deal. If you remember, business was already collapsing with Russo, and with Sullivan it was even worse, and then Russo came back, and then it got even worse. So. It wasn't even like, I mean, I didn't think that Sullivan was the guy to reverse this course. I don't know if anyone could have, because they did so much damage in those previous 3 months. I mean, not even 3 months, the whole year did damage. But I was surprised. But when they showed up in Dallas, Texas, I think it was, I mean, and they did that record rating quarter, not record, but giant quarter hour when those guys first showed up. It was just like, okay, that was the one where, it was the first time where I knew that there was I mean, I knew there was no coming back, but I knew that this was the one where it was like WCW is dead because they gave up they lost it. That's what I thought, that Benoit and Eddie Guerrero were like their future, that when Hogan and those guys and Nash and all got old, and they were getting old, that Benoit, not that, again, that they could compete with Steve Austin, because they couldn't, but that they could compete as far as main event wrestling, and they could keep the company sort of semi-alive or something, at a certain level. And when they went, it was just like, okay, there's no more life preservers here. This thing's just going down.